Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. And I hope you enjoy this new show, whether you're viewing it on the internet or listening to a podcast version of the episode. I do want to thank you for being part of my audience. You can also find links to videos or podcasts on miamighostchronicles.com, as well as where you can submit your story about any eerie experiences you've had, which I would love to hear about. Just go to the Submit Your Story tab. Please subscribe to our channel so that you receive notification of when we release a new show. And find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. This is where I usually live stream and where I give you a behind the scenes look at locations where new episodes are being filmed at. I also tell you about all the interesting guests that will be appearing soon on Stories of the Supernatural. I hope you enjoy the show, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi, everybody. It's Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How is everybody doing today? Good, I hope. Doing fantastic over here. It is a beautiful summer day in South Florida, which, as you guys know, I've said it, it's either hot or hotter, so we're already in the hotter season. So, anyway, guys, today I have a wonderful and so very interesting guest. This is a lady by the name of Joni Mayhan. Now, Joni is presently an author of several super interesting books about the paranormal, but she has been dealing with the paranormal world since childhood, and you guys all know that I always ask about that, all my guests, so it's out there. But not only has she had that experience, she's been a sensitive since she was a child of 6. So we're going to talk to her and ask her about those experiences. But she's the mom of 2 grown children, Laura and Trevor, and now she lived for many years in Massachusetts. Now she's back in her home state of Indiana, and she shares her house with 5 cats and a very loyal dog named Ripley. And everybody knows here that I'm an animal lover, and to me, that Ripley, of course, always reminds me of Alien. One of my favorite characters is Ellen Ripley. And of course, she's a paranormal investigator because she also uh, has currently tours uh, where she lives out of, which is New Harmony. As a matter of fact, her most recent book is called Haunted New Harmony. Okay, she's also in 2016, she had Ghost Magnet, also Signs of Spirit When Loved Ones Visit, and in 2015, Ruin of Souls. And before that, she has a lot of other books. But anyway, let's get her on. How are you doing today, Joni?
I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
Good. It is my pleasure to have you. It is wonderful because everybody, all my audience knows that since I've been a paranormal investigator for so many years, I always love to have other paranormal investigators, even if they're authors and the ones that are currently still in the field, because like I tell everybody, things have changed so much within, let's say, the last 20 years as far as anybody trying to do any research in the paranormal field. Uh, Even though I'm a big believer, I tell them that once upon a time there wasn't even digital photography. You had a camera, and you might have
Yeah.
spent a lot of money just in developing. A lot of people don't realize that not digital is something recent, and when it comes to investigations. But anyway, Joni, is your bio? It says that you had that experience as a young child. What happened when you were a kid? What was your introduction to the paranormal?
Well, I am clairaudient, and I hear
Oh,
tones that are similar to ear ringing. And with that tone comes the sensation that I'm being watched and that there's something near that I can't see.
okay.
And that started as young as 5 or 6. It's hard for me to remember exactly when. It's just kind of always been with me. And my mother would tuck me into my bedroom at night, and I was terrified because I'd hear the tone. I'd feel like something was watching me, and shadows would start moving in my room. And it was, that was kind of my introduction with fear because I didn't know what it was. And it came with a scary sensation, too. So it wasn't just me reading into scary ghosts because a lot of
Hmm.
people watch paranormal shows and movies and things, and they think all ghosts are scary, which I don't believe that to be a fact now. But back then, the ones
Sure.
that were coming to me were definitely scary.
So in other words, you were that tone after a while, that was your first sign of that something was going to manifest. That was your first clue. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's almost as though I can hear the sounds ghosts make when they're nearby. And
Wow.
for me, it's a tone. And um, I always tell people, tell me, well, my ears ring all the time and it's not a ghost. And I say, well, the way you can tell if it's just normal tinnitus or if you have a sixth sense and you're hearing them is to turn your head. If the sound gets louder or softer, then you're probably picking up a ghost.
Wow.
If it's constant and steady, it's probably just tinnitus because tinnitus doesn't.
Right, exactly. And yeah, and and I know there's some people that suffer from tinnitus. It's continuous in some cases where,
Mhm.
it's a real difficult thing because there's a lot of treatments out there, but not all of them work. Um,
Right.
so and then you ha- let me ask you, were you was what you were experiencing, was this something that was part of where you lived, or were you just getting visitors coming in because you were sensitive as a child?
It's so hard to say because I wasn't able to tune in. Now I can tune in. The sound is
Mm-hmm.
like a gateway for me. And once I hear it, if I care to, I can get more information. And
Okay.
I'm now more clairvoyant, so I can pull up mind pictures and information. But back then I couldn't. So
Okay.
it's hard to say. I am a ghost magnet, which you,
Ah,
you talked about that title, and I do. I bring things home constantly. I had to drive
right.
some friends to the airport today, and something popped into my car with me and came home with me today. So I have another new ghost.
Oh, and they're still there, or who? Somebody
Oh
there's
yeah,
okay. And that's why I guess, because some people don't realize, but sometimes people think that ghosts or spirits are tied to haunted houses, like as in that place. And there's a lot of entities or discarnates that are not tied to locations.
they
And
just float
when they
around.
send
Yeah,
somebody like yourself, they're like, "Oh my God, I want to talk to her. She can hear me or possibly see me or whatever it
right.
is."
Yeah,
And
definitely. And it happens more. Sometimes I don't even have to leave the house.
mm-hmm.
They just find me. They just drift along until I feel like sensitives look different than regular people. Like we glow or something, and they see us, and we're like lighthouses, and they gravitate towards us. So you
Yes.
don't even have to leave your house sometimes to pick up an attachment.
Right, right, because I guess yeah, like you said, there's something that gives them a clue. Um, and so you had this experience, and as you went through childhood, what happened? You became less afraid. You learned to understand it. What happened with you as you were growing up, being a sensitive?
Well, the next thing that happened was my father built a beautiful A-frame house, and we moved. And something was on the land already when we built the house,
Oh,
and there was something pretty ancient there,
okay.
and it pretty much tormented me. I saw it when I was, I believe, about 7 years old, probably. I was
Mm-hmm.
having a nightmare, and I was having a lot of nightmares during that period. As soon as we moved into that house, I started having night terrors. People couldn't wake me up, and I would be running and screaming through the house. And I was having really horrific, bloody nightmares, and nightmares
Wow.
where people were going to steal my family. And after one of these, I woke up in a cold sweat, and there was something in my doorway, and it was kind of white and misty, and
Okay.
it drifted closer and closer and closer to my bed until it got right to my bed, and then I screamed. I screamed for my mother, and
Yeah, of course.
then it went away. But through the rest of my childhood, after we moved out of that house, my parents got a divorce shortly after that, and we moved. And I think, I don't remember a whole lot of experiences after that when we moved.
Okay.
Um,
Do you think?
but it was always there to some extent. But I think, a lot of times children grow out of it, and I think I kind of almost grew out of it. But then I moved into a haunted house when I was in my late 20s, and it was a very haunted house, and it picked right back up. And then I knew, without a
Right.
shadow of a doubt, there was a ghost I was dealing with. So it just happened all over again.
Let me ask you, do you think that that experience you had, do you think that was an elemental spirit that you ran across as far as something that was tied to the land, or was it
Uh,
human at one
I don't
point?
think so. No, not elemental, because I ended up, my dad still owns that house, and I
Mm-hmm.
ended up moving back in with him when I was 17. I got in a fight with my mother, and I'm going to go live with my
Yeah,
father, and I
okay.
moved back in, and the ghost was still there. And
Oh.
the ghost, I always say, it young adults have that spiky adrenaline energy,
Mm-hmm.
and if there's something already in the house, it really feeds it and
Yes.
allows it to become supercharged. And that's kind of what happened. This thing was opening and closing doors and just hovering around me. I was afraid of going up the stairs. There's a set of really dark stairs in the middle of the house, and I could just feel it standing at the top of the stairs, and I never wanted to go up there.
Okay.
And it caused some grief for me as a teenager.
Okay. No, yeah, I know that. Yeah, with teenagers, they're putting out all that PK energy. So, yeah, it's not the first time I've heard that a lot of entities, they use that to manifest or to do things that maybe, and by this I'm not saying poltergeist. I'm just saying that they use
Yeah.
the teenage as a battery. So here you go, you're in your 20s and you move into a very haunted house. And what happened there? Did you, I mean, were they friendly spirits? Were they low key? Or were you like, oh, here we go again. What am I doing here?
Well, not so friendly. Former homeowner,
Oh,
and we run into a lot of those. And during investigations, the
mm-hmm.
homeowner decided to stay with the home, and I could feel him, but nothing really happened until we tore out the workbench in the basement. And my guess is that was probably his workbench. We were going to put a family room in there. The minute that workbench went out, we started having just a pretty, I'm not going to say extreme because nobody was hurt, but it was pretty terrifying.
Okay.
And it really opened my eyes. I wrote a book about it. It's called Devil's Toy Box, so I talk about it in that book. But it was very eye opening for me. And it changed me on a lot of levels. And it probably started putting the first cracks in my marriage because it would single me out
Really?
and only do things when I was around, but would
Wow.
never do anything when my husband was around. So he didn't believe me. And it took a long time, probably years. We were there for it took years before he finally did something that my husband heard and couldn't explain, and then
Okay.
he started believing me. So it took a while.
Yeah.
But
And
that resentment builds up because you're dealing with something pretty scary and
yes.
your partner doesn't believe you. You
Yes.
know,
It's a lonely feeling.
it is.
It's a lonely feeling. Um, yeah, I interviewed this gentleman by the name of Ed Becker, and he had an experience back in the 1970s. As a matter of fact, it was one of those
I've read his
exorcisms.
book. Yeah, I've read his book.
And told me, he admitted, he says, my wife, she was a housewife, she had a baby, she was staying home, and she was the one getting the brunt of it, you know? So he says, for the
Mhm.
longest time, I isolated her because I wouldn't believe her. And it kind of,
Mhm.
exactly, it affected our relationship, our marriage, because she would be home all day going through everything, and I would come home, and I'm like the typical man, it's all your imagination. And he says that really, when he really, really got the full, is that she spent a month, I think, visiting her mom,
Uh huh.
and he was there by himself. In other words, you know, he says
The
that
ghost had
that's
nobody else to pick on.
right, and he says that that's when
Yeah.
he really got he couldn't write it off as imagination, whatever, whatever. And he says that from there, that's when the experience started going as far as him getting involved, because and like a lot of men, they get mad, they want to be confrontational because they're thinking they're doing battle with you know
An intruder.
an intruder. And he even told me, go, I made things worse. I realize now I made things worse. But yeah,
Yeah.
that isolation, as in not being believed, and like you said, that you were the one that was. And the thing is this, that you almost think like don't you think that I go through my own, and when I start experiencing things, that I go through my own checklist of what it could possibly be before I get to the conclusion that it's supernatural?
Well, I do on normal things, but with the tones and the sensation, I don't, because there's nothing else that makes that sound. It's very it's very isolated, and it comes with the sensation. So I trust my gut. But people send me pictures all the time saying, "Is there a ghost in this window?" And my conclusion is usually trying to find a reason for it versus just jumping to paranormal.
Right.
I like to, I like to exhaust every possible rational explanation before I call it paranormal.
Exactly. Exactly. And the thing is this, that yeah, because lately, you have all these reality shows and it's become more mainstream, for lack of a better word, as far as being haunted. But before, when it wasn't, people were they were cautious about wanting to accept that they were experiencing something that was ghostly or supernatural or anything. It was like people didn't jump. Like nowadays, it's the other way around. Sometimes people attribute it to the supernatural when it's anything but. But
Oh, I definitely agree.
I don't know.
There's a lot of, I don't really, I belong to a lot of those paranormal communities simply because I've been added to them without being, my permission. But sometimes I'll go on and I'll look, and there's just so many people. There's so many battles too. People will post a picture, and everybody says, "Oh my gosh, there's a woman in the corner," and I look at it, I don't see a thing. And other people will say, "Oh, you're just imagining things." So it's really hard to present anything as paranormal because it's hard to prove it.
Oh, very hard. Well, nowadays, and personally,
It
it's like, to me, it's like the picture. First of all, like exactly like what you said, some pictures you look at them, and I'm thinking to myself, God, that could be a curtain. That could be it could be something
hmm
else. That doesn't mean it's not
Or
that, but
reflection,
you know what? Once
right?
you have that doubt, that's that fuzzy, I'd be like, okay, you know what? I'm sorry, but as far as I'm concerned, this doesn't constitute proof.
Right.
Yeah.
It's hard in the digital age where it's so easy to fake
Oh yeah.
pictures. Even
Yes.
if it does look legitimate, you can't trust it because people are so quick to put out the fakes, and other people are so excited to see it, they'll share it. So you really have a hard time determining whether it's a true paranormal picture or it's something explainable or it's a fake. So I really don't take that many pictures. I do find a few when I'm doing my Haunted New
Mm-hmm.
Harmony walking tour. Sometimes people will catch something in the window,
Right.
and it's just too cool not to look at and say, that looks exactly like a face in the window. I don't know if it is or it isn't, but I'm going to look at it and I'm going to show it to people and say, what do you think?
Well,
But
and this is the thing. You could take a picture, or you could have an experience that cements your own beliefs, or that you, let's say, when you look at that picture, you go, wow, I know that this. But there's a difference between that and presenting it as proof for others to believe it. And sometimes the only one you
right,
really want to prove it to anyway is yourself, when it comes right down to it. Because if once you've had that experience, you know that the spirit world, or whatever you want to call it, is there, just because we don't see it casually all the time. So it depends on, and of course, if, like you said, if you're going after the sensationalism, then of course that's when you get into doctoring photos and
right.
EVPs and you name it. And nowadays you could do that so easily. So what happened when your husband did your husband ever admit, I was wrong? What happened? Did you guys move out? How did you handle that with that homeowner that was, I could tell it's a man thing, a man cave thing, where you took out his workbench? What happened? How did you resolve that?
Right. Well, the way he was sitting in the basement family room that we had made watching TV, and he heard me. I normally would come home. We parked uh, next to the basement door, so we would always come in through the basement door, and it had been snowing. And he heard the kitchen door upstairs open, and it was not a door we normally use
Okay.
because it was difficult to even get to, and if it was snowing, it made no sense. But he heard that door open and close, heard footsteps on the ceiling above his head, and then he heard the toilet flush. And he thought, oh, Joni's home for some reason. She came in through the kitchen door. And then 10 minutes later, I came in through the basement door. And he looked at me and he said, "Did you come home and walk around in the kitchen?" And I said, "No, why would I do that?" And so we went running upstairs thinking maybe somebody had broken into the house.
Right.
And the kitchen door was locked. There was snow on the back step that was completely undisturbed. No wet footprints on the floor. Nobody in the house. And he kind of looked at me and he said, "I can't believe that just happened." And then after that, things started happening. He started experiencing some of the things that I was experiencing. So things started happening to him as well. And we, I wanted to move and he wanted to move. We put the house up for sale, but the ghost did not want us to move. So every person that came in the house wrinkled their nose, even though it was a beautiful house. There's nothing wrong with it. It was, in every sale that we got fell through for some reason. So we had a difficult time trying to sell it, but we did eventually sell it and move, which, we left it there. And I did get in contact with the next people that lived there,
Uh-huh.
and they didn't have quite as few experiences. The only thing that they remembered was they were only there for a few years. They said the kitchen sink would often just come on by itself, which honestly, I wouldn't even call that paranormal if it wasn't in that house, because something could be wrong with the plumbing and
Sure.
cause the sink to come on. But that was the only thing. But if they didn't have a sensitive in the house, he probably wouldn't have bothered, because a lot of what he did was mental torment with me, because he would hover just really close to me, and I could feel him and hear him and all but see him. I knew he was right there, and he would certainly creep me out and
Okay.
terrify me at that point. But it was kind of a launching board for me, because after that experience and after we moved out of that house, I was really curious about what happened to me after I was, was in a safe zone where I wasn't experiencing a haunting.
Mm-hmm.
I became curious about it, and that's a few years after that is when I started investigating for the first time and really trying to work on my abilities to be able to pull more information than just the fear and the sound. I wanted to learn more about what was haunting me.
Okay. So yeah, no, I can understand. It makes a difference when you're dealing on it with something like that on a daily basis, exactly like what you're describing, that hovering or that continuous observation kind of feeling. That's got to be horrible. And what
It
happened
is.
with?
It's like if you left your door open and someone just walked in and made themselves at home, and they would
Wow.
stand beside you all the time and follow you everywhere you went. They'd stand and watch you
Oh.
shower. They'd stand and watch you sleep, and he would poke at me. And sometimes I'd feel physical things. It was just. I'm surprised I'm not crazy after that experience, because I was on edge
I
24/7.
believe it.
There was never a safe time.
Let me ask you, did he ever follow you outside of the house, or was it only when you were at home?
No, no, he stayed there. He
Okay.
never followed me.
And was he the owner? Like, in other words, he was the guy, the owner right before you guys, or had other people moved in there between him and you guys moving in?
Well, there were people that moved in between us. There was another family that was there for. I did, of course, a lot of research and found out that a man did die in the house. He had a heart attack. I mean, not that someone has to die in the house to
Right.
haunt it, but he did die in the house. And then his wife stayed there for a while, but she really kind of went crazy. Neighbors talked about her flinging food against the wall and screaming out the door, and she ended up in a nursing home a lot younger than she should have. And
Wow.
something just happened to her. And then the next people that moved in, it was a family, but the daughter and the wife moved not long after they moved in, and they moved to like Arizona or something. And the man stayed there for a good number of years
Okay.
all by himself, and was having a hard time selling the house and needed a lot of work at that point. And we were a brand new married couple. I was pregnant with my first child, and we were looking for something inexpensive, because Massachusetts is pretty expensive place to buy a house, and
Okay.
it was right up our alley,
Right.
unfortunately.
Yeah. And exactly like, yeah, you just, the last thing you were thinking of is, yeah, I'm going to buy a nice, pretty house that's haunted. And for all you know, maybe also, once that guy was there by himself, he didn't give him as much grief because, like, almost like the way he spared your husband and it was all you. It's not
Yeah, he was a
surprising.
bit of a bully. He was a little bit of a bully. I
Yeah.
don't think he liked women that much,
Yeah, I was about
and
to say
he,
that's what it sounds like.
yeah, yeah.
And then afterwards, now, and I know, like you said, you wrote that book, Ghost Magnet, which is um, that they come to you and what has been your experience with that, Joni? Is it that they just want you to acknowledge them, that they have a message, or is it when you go to certain locations that are hotbeds? What's been your experience with that?
Well, it's really once I started investigating, I started opening myself up, and I started getting better, and they started coming to me, and it's as you know, it's in death as in life. If they are good in life, they are usually
Mm-hmm.
good ghosts. If they were
Yes.
nasty in life, they're nasty ghosts. And
Yes.
I was getting a lot of really dark, scary ones, and a lot of it had to do with how my life was going at the time. I was not as I'm a very positive, upbeat person, but I
Mm-hmm.
went through a period of life where I was newly divorced. I was going through all kinds of issues, and I my vibration was pretty low. I was
Okay.
depressed a lot, and so I was very visible to the lower vibrational ghosts, and they were following me home. So
Okay.
over the years, I learned about vibration. I learned how to really flip that switch and start looking on the bright side of things and trying to see things a little differently and raise my vibration back up. And then I started bringing home more people that needed help and not the dark ones. It's like I'm almost invisible to them. But every
Okay.
once in a while I get one. But it's just been a mixed bag.
Right. And that's the thing that people, I tell them, and because nowadays you know, in TV land, every dark haunting is the D word, the demon, and
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
pointed out, exactly like what you just said. If you have a person that in life was a jerk or an SOB or whatever, a really unpleasant character, they're still like that. If they're hanging around, and that's sometimes where you get that really bad feeling. Just the same as when you come across some living human person that you're like, man, there's something about you I don't like. Get me out of here. You get the feeling. It's not because it's non-human. It's just because this person was a nasty piece of work once upon a time, and they
right.
still are. And
Yeah, definitely. I agree. And just some of them are energy thieves, so like energy vampires, and
hmm
they pull energy from the living to be able to do what they try to do. And even sometimes the good ones do that. And you have to tell them knock it off, and you feel drained days on end until you just can't get up off the couch. And
right.
I, yeah, it's a time to finally get them off of you or get them removed.
Yes. And yeah, because see and it's understandable. It's what they want most for whatever reason is what they don't have, which is a human body. For whatever reason, whether it's to communicate or because they want to know what it's like to have a drink, and yeah, they kind of it's draining even when that's not their intention.
Right.
Um, and when you go through, have you ever had any let's say, do you do any channeling? Are you just strictly psychic as in a sensitive, or do you have any type of medium abilities where you channel?
I well, I was getting ready to tell you that I don't channel
Okay.
because I don't do it on purpose. But as a writer, I can tell you that a lot of artists and writers are
Yes.
channelers, and whether they realize
Yes.
where I've been writing and words have come to me that I don't even know the meaning of, and I'll type them out. I'm like, okay, it sounds good. I just kind of go with the flow, and I'll look it up later, and I'll think that was the perfect word, and there's no way I came up with that on my own.
Okay.
So I get help.
Exactly. Right. So, and I see what you're saying as far as, and yes, I have heard of that. In some once upon a time they would call it the artist muse. That
Right, right.
and yeah, that a lot of people, depending whatever your creative thing was, whether it was writing or music, painting, and I've heard of that. That there's a lot of authors that they say they produce certain works. Um, Sometimes like exactly like what you're describing, equivalent when you read what they're describing, it's equivalent to somebody that's channeling. Sometimes they do it in a really short period of time with an extra burst of energy, or like you said, they come up with ideas. They're like, man, almost like they're observing while they're doing it, like whatever this is great. Let me just not stop. And then they
Well,
produce
it's
this
kind of
work.
funny. Yeah, no, I agree with you. Locally here in town, New Harmony's a very eclectic kind of town, and they have a lot of writers' conferences and festivals and different things. And this last week, they had two writers' conferences in town, and a big group of them stayed at a bed and breakfast that I knew to be haunted, but I don't. It's not on my ghost walk because I don't promote places where people are going to sleep during my ghost walk because I want people to come and stay. Not everybody's going to want to stay at a haunted B&B. But
Exactly.
not a lot of people over the years have had experiences there, not too many here and there. But when this writers conference came to town, four of them had experiences,
Oh,
and someone knew. They directed them in my direction, and I went down and talked to them, and they they probably they kind of brought my point to light because all of these people are people like me that write, but they're not people like me in the fact that they've never had really too many ghost experiences. But we put them in a haunted B&B, and I think that the ghosts went, "Oh, hey,
yes.
you're open to messages," and they all had experiences. It's kind of crazy,
Yes, exactly. That there's something about them that they have that little extra antenna up, and
right?
that the like you said the entities there said, "Oh, look."
Yeah,
And you know what? And people don't realize it's surprising. That's why you have some locations, some houses, for example, which supposedly are haunted. You have one set of a family that's ready to like, they within a week they're ready to tear out of there, and then you have another family who go in there or another person, and they're like, they're good, they're fine, and they're like,
yeah,
no,
they don't
nothing's
have any
happened.
experiences. Yeah, and then they start to dis. Everybody starts to disbelieve the first people because nothing
Right.
happened to the second people, and that happens a lot. And it's happened a lot here in town. As I was researching for Haunted New Harmony, there were some locations where they were just so insanely haunted, like things were flying across the room, crashing, and people were seeing things and hearing things. And then they moved out, and the next people moved in. They haven't had a thing happen to them.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's very subjective,
Yes.
selective. Like they pick who they're going to mess with.
Right. Or or the new family, they get a very low level, very infrequent thing where stuff that you go, it's the wind. Oh, it's something, bird in the attic. Really low
Right.
level stuff that you could just forget it. And
Yeah, definitely.
well, one of the, the Amityville, house, the one in Amityville, the one where, the murder took place, and then that whole Lutz thing, and there was a family that moved in afterwards that lived there for many years, and supposedly they always claimed that nothing happened. And I want to say
But
maybe it's, I'm sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I think there's a reason for that because I think Lorraine Warren and Ed Warren came in and cleared that house after the Lutz family moved out, or whichever ones that were in the book. After they moved out, the Warrens came in. I actually met Lorraine Warren and heard her accounts of Amityville Horror, and it was pretty interesting. But
Right.
so I think when the second people came in, she had already cleared the house, so there really wasn't anything there anymore.
Exactly. And I mean, and of course, and a lot of people, whether it's because of there was something there before, whether it's residual, because let's face it, you had a whole family that was murdered, you know,
Right.
uh, whatever the case might be. But yeah, there were, even though the house did sell, I want to say less than 2 years ago, and it did sell a little bit lower in price than it normally would, because that's a very nice house. But yeah, most probably you're absolutely right that uh, when somebody goes in there and works on it, and from what I understand, that was the thing also when the Lutzes moved in. This was right after the murders, and of course, my question has always been, because whenever they do any history on that house, everything always starts with when the DeFeos moved in there. But I've never heard anything prior of the history of that house. If there was somebody or something already there that also just aggravated what was going on with that family, and then of course it went the way it went. I know
I
that.
believe, yeah, that could definitely. There was already something there when they moved in. I think it's pretty clear by the way it reacted. If the book can be considered true. I mean, there's been a lot of reports over the years that it wasn't true and was true. According to Lorraine Warren, it was the scariest place she'd ever been to, and it was the one place in the world she would never go back to.
Let me tell you something. The one that does it for me, I think, of all the material that I've ever seen connect to that is that photograph that have of that little boy by the stairs. When
Mhm.
that's the one that I look at that and I'm like, God, that's pretty hard. That's and this
Yeah,
was in
it's
the times
creepy.
prior to technology as far as doctoring photographs and things like that. That's the one picture that I'm like, wow, that's pretty difficult to overlook. But yeah, there's places that for some reason they amp up in response to who's living there. Whether it's
Exactly.
because you've got a sensitive, or in this case, let's say what happened to the DeFales, you've got a lot of energy. Maybe there's a dysfunction going on in the family and a lot of emotion, and it supercharges. And then you've got an entity that feeds off of that. So let me ask you, Joni, in this tour, have you ever had? And I know you have them, like you said, follow you back. Have you ever had any of your usual spirits ever come and appear to you at home or communicate with you at home, just because out of familiarity? Because let's say they see you doing that tour and there's something like, hey, I know her.
I really haven't. It's kind of interesting in this town. The ghosts are very much attached to the buildings that they're in.
Okay.
It's unlike anywhere else I've ever. It's very condensed haunting. Almost every building in town has a ghost or two, and they pretty much stay there. I've not had them follow me. That doesn't mean I haven't had other ones follow me, but I have never had anything from any of my ghost walks or investigations come home with me, which is a real positive thing because it allows me to continue. If I were constantly having issues, then I wouldn't be doing the ghost walks. And I think they do enjoy the fact that in some cases I'm telling a story that has been almost lost in history, and I was able to dig it up and find out what was going on with them, and they like hearing their story, so they don't mess with me.
Okay. And how about any unpleasant? I mean, I know you described where you had that experience when you were living there, and fortunately you were able to sell the house and move away. Uh, but let's say in this case where you're talking about a discarnate that is not bound to a location, have you ever had any non-human or really really nasty entity
I
follow
have,
you or attach to you or one of those things?
yes, I have, and I wrote about it in my book, The Soul Collector. That
Okay.
was my first. That was my first paranormal book, and it took me 2 years to work up the nerve to finally write about it because when
Wow.
it was removed, I was warned not to think about it, not to talk about it, and certainly never write about it. But after going through something like that, it was almost like living through a near death experience and not being able to talk about it. And I
Okay.
thought, I need to tell people about this because there might be some message in there where I can help other people. My
Sure.
warning was ghost hunting is very dangerous. And I did a lot of wrong things. It was when I first started ghost hunting and I brought home something non human. And I didn't have a resource, any way to get this off of me.
Okay.
And in some cases, you can't just say go away and they go away.
Mm-hmm.
In this situation, it was stuck to me and it was making my life a living hell. And it took me months to be able to find a way to finally get rid of this.
And what was your first sign? Let's say you said that you did an investigation and you came back, and then what was your first sign that you were like, oh, was it dreams? Was it, nightmares is what I mean, or was it stuff that you started witnessing, or what was your first sign that somebody
I
had followed you?
Well, through the clairaudience, I knew it was in the car with me when I left the site,
Really?
and I could hear it and I could feel it. And I pulled over to the side of the road and I saged my car, I saged myself. I told it to go away, not to follow me, and nothing happened. It stayed with me. It was like it didn't phase it at all. So I came home and it followed me all the way out of the car into the house, and it was there just looming over me constantly.
You know what? When you say that thing about saging, because I tell everybody, because I've been doing investigations since the 90s, and I would say, you know what? Sometimes I wouldn't do it in front of the client's house, but I'd go around the corner or whatever, and I would sage my car down. I'd open up the trunk, and I had, because sometimes I worked with other teams, we cooperated, and they'd be like, Marlene, I'm like, I don't care. You know, I'm not taking any chances uh, of having any hitchhiker come home with me. Even if they're nice, I don't care. I don't want that. I don't want that.
Right.
Because just on the off chance that you get something that is dark, that is malevolent, and then it's just, and like you said, sometimes even your best efforts. And how did you finally resolve it? Did you get somebody to help you out?
I did. I don't want to talk about it too much because I
Okay.
tend to give too much away on radio shows and podcasts, and then
Okay.
people don't read my book. But it was quite an effort, and I can say that I probably came pretty close to being fully possessed by the time we got rid of it. I was losing myself very rapidly, and it didn't happen a minute too soon.
And how long? What length of time were we talking? Less than a year, months, or how long was it before you?
Months,
Months. Okay.
several months.
Okay. Okay. And I take it then, like everything, it wasn't anchored. Just it was like with you all the time. It sounds like what you're describing. That, in other
Well,
words.
it was a soul collector.
Ooh.
It was collecting souls to gain more power, and it wanted to collect me as well. So it was trying to drive me to an early death in any means
Oh.
possible. And thankfully, it did not, because I'm still here to talk
Yeah.
about it.
Now, Joni, let me, and this is a cautionary tale because everybody knows I get on my soapbox sometimes when I talk about people that jump into paranormal investigations.
Hmm.
When you went on that investigation, did you have any idea that there was something like that there, or for you was it just if anything, it was going to be regular dead people, or did you have any idea that?
Right. Well, we had been. It was a haunted. Well, it was an old prison camp that was nothing but ruins left,
Okay.
and it was in the middle of the state park. And we had been exploring that area all summer long, going out and trying to find the ruins. We had a map, and we were trying to figure out what all the buildings were. And we did
Okay.
some investigating there all summer. Never really felt anything negative, but I went ghost hunting when I was in a state of depression. So I had had
Oh.
something really bad happen to me, and one of my friends was trying to cheer me up and said, "Hey, you want to go on a ghost hunt tonight? Let's go out to the prison camp."
Oh boy.
And I went, and my vibration was very low, and he was
Yes.
able to attach to me.
Yes, you
So
were
I always
vulnerable.
tell people, if you're tired, if you're sad, don't go ghost hunting. Only
Yes.
go when you're feeling at your best, because your vibration is going to really impact whether you bring something home or whether you don't.
Yes. Yes. And you know what? I'm you know why I'm laughing because every once in a while, like I said, I get on my soapbox and I tell people, I say, you know what? Um, when you exactly like what you described, I said, and not even that, I said, if you're exhausted, let's say you're having a really hectic time, if you're coming down with a cold, I said, I would pass up going to an
Mhm.
investigation just on the off chance that you come across something in that location which is like this. Because believe me, they will always pick on the most vulnerable or the weakest link in the team. Okay? So I say,
Definitely.
you learn. It doesn't even have to be that extreme. Hey, I'm super exhausted because, I've just had so many things to do, or I think I'm coming down with a cold and I just don't feel. You know what? I tell everybody, I said, pass on it, pass on it, pass on it. Because chances are, yeah, you could go and maybe there's no haunting or maybe it's a regular dead but I said because it will target and as a way, especially if it's dark and malevolent, to try to disrupt even the investigation or investigators from returning, and it'll
Right.
zero in on that person that they think, and if that person's sensitive, yeah, it could. And I've heard several stories throughout the years from different groups where basically it's affected people profoundly, and in some cases totally disintegrated the team. They
Right.
they did never regroups. Things happen, and before you know it, the group is dissolved through different issues. But yes, and again, I'm gonna blame TV Land on that, where sometimes they make it look very adventurous and interesting. You know, like when you go to the movies and you see a scary movie and it's like, oh, and you have a fright, but then the lights come on and everybody goes home, and that was the end of that. And I said, this is the version where even if the lights are on and you go home, it's not over. And I said, and despite what you think that 72 hours later you've got flying furniture, sometimes this is very gradual how it starts affecting you depending on what's going on with your life. And then what you described, where all of a sudden I imagine there comes that moment when you're like, okay, how do I get help? How do I get out of this? Because if not, um and you know what, Joni, I'm glad you got help, and I'm sure you do too. But you know what, there's a lot of people that sometimes this happens to them and they really don't understand why or how it happened to them. They
But
don't.
there's a lot of people walking around with attachments that
Oh,
don't realize it too.
yes.
They everything in their lives going to crap, and
Yes.
they're sick all the time. They're drained of energy, or sometimes their personalities start changing
Mm-hmm.
because the whatever's attached to them starts changing them.
Yes.
So I always tell people that if you're a sensitive, especially, but if you start investigating, always have a good backup plan. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
what am I going to do in the worst case scenario?
Yes.
And I didn't have that backup plan when I was dealing with Soul Collector. I now have a really good resource. I have a man named Michael Robichaud. He's a shaman out of Virginia, and he's like a modern day superhero. I wrote a book about him called Ruin of Souls. He can send his spirit guides in. He has like a army of warrior spirit guides
Okay.
that will come in and remove ghosts from the location.
Okay.
And he keeps me protected. He's removed a lot of really nasty ones um, from from my house,
No.
and he's helped a lot of other people too.
And you know what? For I don't do it now because I don't have time. But for many years, I was a hypnotherapist, and I worked in alternative areas of hypnosis, and one of them was dealing with attachments. And um, I know exactly. I've run across attachments from dead people, and I have run across attachments of non-human, and uh, and I've even encountered where people have had both. And I say they'll as a matter of fact, those non-human ones will push the human ones forward for whatever reason. So it could be a variety of reasons why this person got the attachment, and they stay in the background like, hey, nothing, you've done your work. And they in other words, there's a manipulation there, hoping that they'll be overlooked as far as removal. So yeah, I've had experiences firsthand with what you're talking about, and it could be quite intense. People have no idea. It's can be very intense, and
Right.
and for people that just never understand that that is the source of what's going on with them, whatever it might be. Some people, like you said, their life has gone to crap. Sometimes it's addiction that they can't overcome. It could be, the anger issues. Uh, yeah, I'm not gonna say that's the overall solution to everything, but a lot of times that aggravates a lot of things going on in people's lives. So, you said that that book that you wrote about that gentleman is the one, Ruin of Souls. Is that the one that about that
Ru-
person that helped you out?
yeah, ruin of souls. It's the last line in the prayer to Saint Michael the Archangel, and I did that on purpose because we used that prayer a lot
Okay,
when we're cleansing houses and when we're doing protection. So it's kind of an important prayer for me.
sure, sure. So, and and I'm because I'm this is my other thing. Whenever you've and I know you do tours, and it sounds like you have these regular houses. Joni, have you ever been asked to go on an investigation that for some reason you and like I tell everybody, if you've been doing investigations for a while, sometimes things start happening even before you get there. Because,
Oh, constantly,
on
constantly.
have you ever had the feeling like I just better not go? And do you pay attention to it, or how do you handle when you get that gut like, mm,
I listen to my gut because
okay,
I think my gut is my spirit guides and probably some of my deceased relatives trying to give me a message that I need to stay away, and I do listen to that.
ah,
I did just recently investigate Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Louisville, Kentucky. I
okay,
just did that last Thursday, a week ago tonight, in fact.
mm-hmm,
And I was warned by two of my mentors, including Michael Robichaud, that it was not going to be, that I needed to not go, that there was some really dark stuff there. But I did not listen that time because there's a part of me also that feel that my life is so compromised by the paranormal that I often don't do the things that I consider fun because I'm afraid something bad's going to happen. And I said, well, I'm still doing Waverly Hills. It was something that I really wanted to do, and
mm-hmm,
Michael kept me protected, so I didn't bring anything home.
okay,
But there is a lot of I probably shouldn't have. If I didn't have Michael, I probably wouldn't have gone. But Michael did keep me protected.
okay. And
And
and the thing is, one of the things, I'm sure with I haven't I every time I've tried to go to Waverly Hills, I just my timing is all wrong. It just doesn't ever work out. Um, but even without going, I'm sure that there is intelligent hauntings there. That goes without saying. But I don't know if it's why it is that locations like this, asylums, sanatoriums, prisons, just about any place that's housed people with different problems, you always have those very dark, non human spirits, whether they were attached to the people that were there or they were just attracted because it's a place where there's a lot of human agony. And those are the ones that worry me the most when going to some of these places. Um,
it's a feeding ground. It's a feeding ground for them because they can feed off of that. And then as word gets out that the place is negatively haunted and investigators come in, they can feed off of that fear as well. So it just makes them stronger. So I was lucky to have Michael keeping me protected. And we did our own things too. We did a meditation together for protection and
okay.
prayers, and everybody was carrying whatever they felt made them feel safe in their pockets. So we went in with open eyes. We knew there was something there, and we were
Mm-hmm.
cautious. We never provoke. I really hate it when
Oh,
I see groups provoke.
yes, God.
And we didn't really have any really negative experiences, but it was very intense. It's a place, it's very hard to get into, and that's one of the reasons why I was insistent upon going, because I tried to go last year and couldn't get in.
Mm-hmm.
And this year I had an open opportunity. One of my friends had booked the place. It goes up for booking January 1st, and by the end of the day, it's pretty much booked solid for the
Yeah,
year.
yeah,
So you have to be ready with your credit card, and
exactly.
I just got lucky this year, and I'm like, I am not missing this opportunity. And I had friends flying in from Massachusetts, where I
Mm-hmm.
lived for 30 years, to attend with me. So I'm not going to, sit outside while everybody's having a good
Yeah, it's
time.
like,
I was going.
that's not happening. No, no,
Yeah,
no, no.
yeah, it was already planned, and I said I just have to be careful, and
Mm-hmm.
I was, and we ended up okay. We had some interesting experiences, but I think that in some ways I need to experience some things that are slightly dark because I do write about it, and I
Right.
do write things that helps other people on how to deal with it. So if I'm constantly standing back, not experiencing these things, then I'm not going to be able to help other people in how they deal with it.
Sure. Do you have any books now? Any new? I know you just released one. You do you have any in the works now?
I do. I'm actually working on two right now, back and forth. But the paranormal one that I'm working on is called When Ghosts Are Near.
Okay.
And I'm interviewing people and asking them two questions. How do you feel when a ghost is near? What kind of signs do you have? And then what is your most profound experience? Because sensitives and actually non-sensitives alike all feel ghosts differently. Some people might hear them like I do. Other people Their scalp crawls. Someone I just interviewed, she feels a pulling, like her feet are magnetic,
Mm-hmm.
and it just goes so far across the range. And I thought this could be a really interesting book because people who have been experiencing the paranormal may not realize that that's what they're experiencing.
Yes, can you imagine? Because yeah, we're just as just we're different, and our sensitivities, and I'm gonna like I tell everybody, back in the good old days when you didn't have a million gadgets like they do now for ghost hunting, this
Right.
was the way. I mean, yeah, you had your camera and whatever, but this was the way a lot of times when people would do any type of investigation or ghost hunt, this was how you knew it. Even the person that was not, let's say, a psychic, their bodies would be the ones that
Right.
would give them a heads up that something was coming close to them, or they were going into an area that there was something paranormal occurring. And
Right.
I think sometimes that uh, because of all the gadgets nowadays, that they have all the FLIR cameras and this and that, and it gets a little bit dismissive about what the human body does, especially like what you said, when you learn what it means. Like you just described, when you hear those tones that already this is tied into a paranormal event, or something or somebody's coming through. That it's a very good barometer, I think. Sometimes I think even better than some of the gadgets, because sometimes you'll have electronics that will not capture anything, and somebody there will say, I know, or I feel, or I even see something that none of the electronics will pick up. So,
Right. And, like in New Harmony, we're dealing with 19th century ghosts, and they're a little bit afraid of a lot of our equipment. So
yes,
I tell people, you use your body to determine, use your eyes, look around, watch. You don't have to catch it on camera to have it
exactly.
be an experience or have it be real. And we use things like dowsing rods and pinwheels and pendulums,
Yes,
more
yes,
low tech devices, and they seem to
yes,
really have more of a reaction with that. So we
yes.
try with the electronics because it's a crowd pleaser. Everybody wants to see the lights go off in the
Right,
K2, and we
yeah.
did have that happen the other night, but it's kind of rare. But they will come to us in other ways if we're just paying attention.
Yeah, like I told, I've used dowsing rods. They're a little bit time consuming, because you can only gotta question the certain way, because basically sometimes it's either or yes or no kind of, but it's very productive if you know how to use the dowsing rods.
Right.
They can be a really good instrument for communicating. But anyway, Joni, I want to thank you so much for letting me interview you. It has been so super interesting as far as all your experiences, because again, there's a lot of people like yourself that have an experience as a child and they shut down. They in the contrary, they go in the opposite direction. They never want to have anything to do with the paranormal. And despite your
Right.
experiences, you've gone forward and you've become an author, and you have ghost tours. And for those people that sometimes they've had that one maybe negative experience and they shy away from it, sometimes I think you're better off confronting it and overcoming it and dealing with it, uh,
Instead of running from it.
than running from it, because fear is not a good thing. And let's face it, contrary to what a lot of people think, the disembodied spirits of people who have passed on are all over the place. So
Oh, they're everywhere.
they're
I
everywhere.
wanted to also mention that I
Sure.
do write a paranormal blog,
Okay.
and people can find that on my website, which is jonimayhan.com, or if they can't know how to spell my name, hauntednewharmony.com will bring them there too,
Okay.
so
Haunted.
they can read my blogs and learn about my books, which my books are all on amazon.com.
Okay.
And
And you've got links
so
on your
that
page, right? Over to where you have the books.
I do.
Perfect. Perfect. And of course, any of your new books, everything that's going to appear on your blog, on your website as they come up.
Yes, exactly.
Perfect. Again, thank you so much, Joni. It has been absolutely wonderful. You have been a fantastic guest. And good luck on all
Thank
of
you.
your new projects.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.
Isn't she a great guest? I'm not kidding, guys. You know what? Um, there's a lot of people out there, and because I've spoken to them, that have had as children. Some people have some experiences with the paranormal when they're kids, but it's kind of like a little bit scary, but not really. Maybe some footsteps or just stuff that makes them feel a little bit weird, but not really truly frightening to the point of. But when you listen to her description that she had as a child, okay, where she realized clairaudience, this was like her heads up, the spidey sense that something was going to manifest for her. And she had that experience. And then when she also moved in to a haunted house, well, the thing with her, when she lived with her dad, like he said, here she comes back to that same house. And that's also sometimes how you prove this was not a little kid's imagination. Many years ago, here I am now, uh, a teenager, almost an adult, and you're afraid of going up those stairs. Okay, so, and she went forward with it. I'm sure maybe she's had moments where she was like, why did I do that? But she has overcome it. In other words, my point is she has not let it dominate her life or wanting to do what she wants to do. She, like now, as she described, she went to Waverly Hills. She took a lot of precautions. She runs tours for haunted locations where she lives at, and she writes these books. There's a lot of people that long before now would have said, paranormal? No. Uh-uh. And and don't get me wrong, for some people, if that's what you want to do, that if you think that's the best option for you, absolutely go for it. But what it comes down to is fear is something that will wear you down, especially continuous fear, especially if you have some type of sensitivity, or you there's something about you that makes spirits want to contact you. Let me tell you something, living in fear will wither you. It will wilt your spirit. Um, and sometimes you have to confront it. Even if you don't want to work in it, you have to confront it and put up boundaries and say no or whatever. Because, like we were discussing, you don't have to go to a haunted location, a haunted house, a haunted field, a haunted, uh, you know, whatever. You have some of these, for example, locations to experience ghosts. They're all around us. There are some, yes, that are tied to certain locations, like where she lived at, that it was the old owner, and sounds like he was a nice guy. Didn't like women, but he was kind of tied to his house. He just wanted to hang out at his place where he lived at for whatever reason. Okay, not every discarnate does that. Some discarnates go to where they work. Maybe they were workaholic, or maybe their best moments in life were at work. This is what fulfilled them. Or, I mean, it could be, but bottom line, there's a lot of people that somewhere in a transition between dying and going off to where you're supposed to go after you die, which is where you shed your ego and you shed your desire for a human body, or needing a house like that owner of that house, where you don't care that that was the house you built. You don't care if that was the shop that you had or the workbench, because your understanding where you're at transcends that. So you understand that was me, my human body, person, me. Uh, I was maybe proud of it, but I don't need that. That doesn't matter to me anymore. Okay, so there's some people that somewhere along in that transition, they lose their way or they get stuck. And I've talked about it before. It could be they're scared, they think of Judgment Day, maybe they've been brought up with religious beliefs, even if it was something they heard when they were a kid. Some of them are very materialistic and they want to hold on to what they have. Yeah. Love, hatred, sometimes very strong emotions will bind you for whatever reason. But bottom line, some of these spirits, or some people that die and don't realize they're dead, they're self aware, and maybe in their mind they didn't realize that you're still self-aware, and they kind of are lost, and they can't quite figure out what happened to them, maybe because it was sudden, or they were unconscious, or they were under the influence of some type of narcotic, as in a drug, and they transition, and they kind of suspect it, but they don't want to accept it. Or, I mean, God, there's a whole host of, and I'm going to give you a perfect example. There's a book written a little bit after the turn of the century by a gentleman by the name of Dr. Carl Wicklund. And he was a psychiatrist, and part of his work, eventually he moved out to California, was his wife was a medium. She would channel the spirits. And one of the things that he describes was where they had certain spirits, which were suicidal. And these persons in life had committed suicide, had been successful, but for some reason they didn't recognize the success. So they were still trying to reenact it. And what happened was that when they would attach themselves to a living human host, which, I've talked about it on other shows, that hamster wheel mentality of, I want to die, I want to die, I want to kill myself, they would make people that before never had suicidal ideations want to be suicidal. And in some cases, they were successful with it. These were cases where people would commit things or attempt suicide where everybody was totally like, where did this come from? This person's never been suicidal, never talked about suicide. And Dr. Wicklund's theory, which was pretty convincing when I read the book, was that what they had was an attachment of somebody that was suicidal, had been successful, okay, but never realized that they were dead. They kept wanting to reenact, and then when they attached that person, this living human host, would, for lack of a better word, because of that attachment, start eventually trying to be dictated emotionally by what that spirit was trying to accomplish. And well, through his intercession, and with his wife acting as medium, because basically she would have that spirit, she would channel that spirit, that discarnate, that was, and then he would talk to it, and that's when it would talk about, he would converse with this discarnate, who would describe, as in, if, for example, the same thing, you know um, back then, sometimes people would commit suicide by drinking carbolic acid, or there was another one that had committed suicide by jumping out a window, and the person that attached themselves to had tried it a couple of times, hadn't been successful, and the whole family was like pulling their hair out because this woman had never been suicidal in her life, and all of a sudden, in a short period of time, um, she had tried to jump out the window, and they couldn't explain. But anyway, and by the way, follow up, according to him, was that once he conversed and basically sent these attachments on their way, these people, what sometimes would have gone, were under psychiatric care for what was considered insane behavior, mental illness, everything went good. Everything was fine. But I'll do a show about that. That's a very interesting subject, by the way. Super, super interesting. As a matter of fact, one of the first things that I was reading about, which was he's describing that, even though eventually he went into psychiatry, that all doctors, all medical students, they have the same basis, which is anatomy and dissection. And of course, remember, this was turn of the century, and he described where his first encounter with a ghost, a spirit, was where he was in the dissection lab of the university he was studying at. And he was, when they would have these bodies, different students would work on the bodies, I guess, depending on what you were doing. And he had been working on the body of a woman. And I can't remember now if she had been a murder victim or suicide, something. I can't remember the circumstances of her death, but this lady, the spirit of this lady, of the body that he was working on because of his classes, medical classes, all of a sudden started coming through. And that was something else. It's a very interesting, like I said, I'm going to do a show all about that. But anyway, guys, I hope you like this show. Make sure to check out Joni Mayhan's website, her blog. There you'll find links to her books, the ones that have been published, the ones that will come out. Also, you can also get information about as far as if you want to book the tour uh, out of where she lives at. And again, guys, my true believers, don't forget to send me your stories. Catch me Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. If you've got a story, just send it to me at Marlene at MiamiGhostChronicles.com. And guys, thank you so very much for being part of my audience again and sharing this time with me. You guys are wonderful. Take care.